So I started DNA in May of 2020. And the whole idea behind it was to bring the level of experience that I have, as well as the team, from all of our motorsport work, and bring that to the guys who are, your average track guys, your street car guys, all the way up to really, the time attack cars, the fresh builds, chassis, things like that. So that's the idea behind it. So the words wheel alignment has like a stigma attached to it, right? Which is take it down to your local tire shop, they'll sort out the toe, make sure everything's okay, and off you go. And it's quite an inexpensive necessity, I guess you could say, for your servicing of your car. Here, I think the best way to describe the difference would be, cars don't necessarily come here for a wheel alignment, they come here for a setup. So you might have someone who just has a road car, but instead of just having a look at the toe and looking at the car as a big picture sort of thing, we go into the minor detail. So we'll have a look at all those little things and try to get the entire car working together as one. Before we opened DNA, the bulk of the team here, obviously myself included, had only ever really done motorsport oriented work. So GT3s, cup cars, radicals, things like that. So when you're constantly pushing the limit of any given chassis, when that car turns on, it's going out there to go 10/10ths. It's not being street driven. So whenever you're pushing the limits of a chassis, all the half a mil here and the half a degree there, they all actually start to matter. So when a client comes here, we do have the machines and they've got the database in them and whatnot, but to be honest with you, I could probably count on one hand how many times we've used it. And the reason being is every car is done on a case-by-case basis. So we might have 10 Evos come in a week. And those 10 Evos will more than likely have 10 different alignments because they've got different wheels, they have different needs, they've got different offsets, brake packages, all sorts of things. So that 0.1, 0.2, half a degree, all of these things really matter to us. So we take that, I guess, those ethics, and we pour those into all the cars that come through the door. Obviously, as any profession, your facilities and your tools are quite important to your trade. So here, the workshop, obviously, we've got the hoist and each individual work bay. We've also got the aligners. The aligners that we use, they're not laser aligners, which is a fairly conventional aligner. They use 3D cameras. So for starters, the calibration of them, they're calibrated every single time the car goes on there, they're calibrated to that car. So it's not something that we necessarily need to keep track of, because the calibration process starts again every time. The other good thing that I love about it is the resolution of the cameras is fantastic, and it also can give us our reading live. So if we're making height adjustments, if we're adding load, for example, if we're trying to test the aero load of a car, we can hang weight from the K-frame, the subframe, something like that, weigh it down with X amount of kilos of downforce, whatever we expect, and we can physically watch the variation in camber and toe change. So we know whether, if the car feels fantastic in all the low speed stuff, but we know we might have a small issue in the high speed stuff, we can actually find that quite quickly here. From there, obviously tire machines, because tires are our best friend. And then from there, we go into the shock room, which is, I guess, a very, it's very specially designed for what we do. Gives us the ability to dyno dampers, find out whether they're healthy, if they're in need of any reconditioning, really. From there, we can pull them all apart with different stations within the shock room. We can revalve those dampers. Suspension development and chassis development, from what we've seen, is probably the most underrated, I guess, field of in the automotive industry. So we see it all the time where guys will spend thousands and thousands of dollars working on their engines or buying wheels or whatever the case is, but fundamentally the one thing that controls all of that mass, the one thing that controls those wheels, is usually the last thing. So starting with Time Attack, we work with a lot of workshops, a lot of engine shops and car builders and things like that will trust us and come to us for the final setups on their cars. So we work with teams like Evolution Racing Spares, for example. Their Club Sprint winning Time Attack car is one to mention. Aside from the Time Attack level, our guys here are very experienced and fully equipped engineers. So we do work at much higher levels of motorsport as well. So typically this year, for example, we've got a TCR car that we look after that runs the full length of that series. We're also looking after two of the brand new 992 GT3 Cup cars. So we're driving with guys like Max Vidal and Luke Yulden, who's a Bathurst 1000 winner. This is the caliber of car and the caliber of driver that we're working with. So again, that experience that we have out there really trickles down, and the benefit, aside from those teams, of that knowledge is, you know, our end users, which is our time attack guys and our street car guys. Taking the circuit side of things out of it as well, we do also look after a fair few drag cars. We have worked with teams like CMV Performance, Moit's Motor Cars. What we knew about JET200 before it came here was that it was a constant work in progress, but constantly evolving in the right direction, which is good. So when we had the opportunity to be part of that build as well, it was an honour. So as far as the car itself is concerned, really well built car from what we've seen. So we looked at everything like droop travel, bump travel, gaps to the bump stops, things like that. Aside from, you know, the camber, caster and toe, which were all manipulated to achieve, you know, the baseline setup that the team was after. Aside from all that, it then went on to have a final corner weight, which is, again, another underrated part of a setup. So with JET200, obviously the driver's had the car for 18 years and he's got a fair bit of experience driving the car. So his input, as well as the pro driver that will be piloting it at Time Attack, John Boston, is very important. So when a new car comes in, to figure out where we want to start, the first thing we want to do is hear from the drivers or the driver. And from there, typically there might be an engineer of sorts or a head mechanic or a technician that knows the car quite well, that has played with things at the track and done a lot of testing. So we asked those questions. In this case, it was Chris from Shockworks who had designed the new dampers for the car. So we took obviously Chris's input into consideration, as well as Andrew, the main driver for the car, and John Boston, the pro driver for the car, and that gave us a good idea of where we want to have what window the car likes to operate in, and that's basically where we started. But again, lots of work, took a full day, and you name it, we touched it. So step one, regardless of the car, is to look at it. So the first thing that we do is we pop the car onto our aligner and we take our baseline measurements, whether that's ride heights, typically from the chassis. A lot of bodywork can throw out where you typically would measure your ride height from, so we take chassis references using a laser. From there, the team will then get underneath the car and see what we have to play with. So if the car has different hubs, or if it's got different arms, or whatever the case is, we need to have a look at all these things, take it all into consideration, and then know, okay, can we play with track? Can we play with, can we independently change toe from camber? Sometimes in the rear of cars like BMWs, as soon as you adjust the camber, the toe moves. So yeah, step one is basically set the car down, what we call a set down, and look at everything. Corner weighting is a very underrated part of a vehicle setup, and it can make a massive difference, and it can really impact the results that you can get while you're out there. So typically, I'll put it to you this way. Let's say you've got a car and you've got the driver in there, and the front right is 50 kilos heavier than the front left when we put it on those scales. If you go to jump on the brakes into a left-hand corner, as you peel off the brake and you turn the car in, that front right is going to go from a 50 kilo variance, probably, again, depending on the setup, might go to 70 kilos, 80 kilos, 90 kilos, who knows. So if you have something like that and you're really trying to extract a lot of the braking performance out of the car, you might have one wheel locking up before the other. So this is why we corner weight vehicles. Again, aside from the chassis benefits, braking is a big part of that. So with the corner weights, when we do get a car on there, we adjust the corner weights by manipulating the heights of the car. But also when you move the heights of a car, you also change the alignment. So it does throw a spanner in there, and there is a right and wrong way to a corner weight and align a car. So it is, again, something we're very aware of, and we do as part of the process here. So when you do corner weight a car, first thing is the car complete? Sometimes cars come to us with no doors on them and they want to corner weight it, or they've still got full interior, for example. Again, this car, the JET200, had a fair bit of aero on the car. So when the car first arrived, the front splitter wasn't there, so we had to compensate for that weight, which we did so by use of sandbags and other bits and pieces. The driver weight is a very big part of that as well. So we will add the weight of the driver using sandbags and whatnot to the driver's seat, and then from there we corner weight the car so that it's as close as possible to what it's going to be like out there. Another thing that we also have to take into consideration is the fuel load. So for a Time Attack car, typically the cars will go out there with quite a low fuel load. Let's call it 20 litres, or some even less if they've got surge tanks and things like that. But if it's an endurance racer, an endurance car that's going to leave the pits with 100 kilos in the 100 litres, of fuel in the back, well, we need to try to monitor that. But also, as the fuel runs down, how is the corner weight going to change? So there's so much to consider. There are so many variables at play here, which is why, again, it is so important that you set your car up properly. once the car was obviously set up here, the first test day was at Pheasantwood, or shakedown we could say, and the feedback that we got from that, from the driver, which is, you're always a little bit nervous before and after a test day, but the feedback that we got was that the car was well and truly in the window, and the driver was quite happy with the results. So, hearing that from Andrew is always a positive thing. By no means is anything perfect. There's always tweaks and changes and things that we can consistently do to extract more I guess results, get more results out of the car. But also, it is also up to the driver to find the next hurdle. So the car may feel fantastic doing a minute 40 around Eastern Creek, but then how do we get it to a 38? Once we're at a 38, what's the next problem? So it's a consistent work in progress, but to hear that the car's in the window out of the box is always a fantastic way to start. In the case of JET200, there's an entire team behind that car, which is great. So when you've got someone like John Boston behind the wheel, who's got a very good sensor in his backside, getting out and hearing the feedback from him, and then having a team that's knowledgeable enough to make changes according to our suggestions, or Chris's suggestions, or the driver's suggestions, is really good. It gives us the confidence that our setup started in the window, and it's going to stay there, and it's going to continually hone in throughout the day.